I just want to let everyone know that, as you've just seen the pop-up, it's being recorded today because we're going to upload this to our YouTube channel. And if anyone in the public or the viewers have any issues with this, just write to us and let us know, and we can edit stuff out for publication. If anyone, including the speakers, needs to leave for any reason during the talks, especially those in Ukraine, then please do so without hesitation or explanation. And finally, just to keep updated on the future seminars in the series, as well as other events, make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram, which is the title of the book and from my name here. Anyway, that's enough from me, so I'll just pass over. I hope everyone enjoys today's talks and discussions.
Hello, nice to see you all. My name is Eva, and I'm going to chair this seminar today. So this is the first of the series of seminar, and today we're going to speak about the ecocide in Ukraine. And let me just have this couple of minutes long introduction to the topic. Ukraine is home to a diverse range of environments, including the richly biodiverse wetlands of Polysia, which is known as Europe's Amazon in the north, the expansive grassland steppe in the east, the lowland forests and alpine meadows in the Carpathians to the west. Ukraine is also home to one of the world's worst environmental catastrophes, the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. It's also commonly known as the breadbasket of Europe, and is a country scarred by imperial forms of resourcification in the eastern Donbas region. Russia's invasion has killed tens of thousands of Ukrainians and destroyed homes and entire cities, but it is also devastating Ukraine's environment, and ecocide that activists worry is going largely unrecorded amid the broader national tragedy. We believe that environmental crimes are a part of Russian full-scale war, the genocidal war. Most people pay attention to loss of life and damage to infrastructure, but lots of people and even the national government forget about losses and damage caused to the environment. Some of the damage will only last hours, while others will be felt for years, and yet more could linger permanently without cleanup efforts. There are trees and whole areas of woodland destroyed by shelling and bombs that will take decades to grow back. Fires lead to destruction of ecosystems, the destruction of pipelines, the flooding of coal mines, and other such acts cause air, soil, and water contamination. Blocked ports, burned grain, devastated and poisoned earth in Ukraine leads to the global food shortages. Additionally, the global reliance on environmentally destructive Russian oil and gas has prevented the international community from fully isolating Russia and supporting Ukraine to reclaim all its occupied territories. Ukrainians, meanwhile, have shown immense resilience, amidst which deep-rooted connections to land and landscape have begun to re-emerge. Today, we will broadly look at the topics of ecocide in Ukraine. As a group of researchers, but also artists and curators, we decided to give it a broad interdisciplinary frame. Our speakers today are Alex Fisher, Natasha Chychasova, and Kateryna Polianska. Alex will look at the ecological park at the Pavlohrad chemical plant and the processes of demilitarization present yet before the Russian invasion in Ukraine. Natasha will address the question of the global food security system and how the invasion is linked to the global threat of starvation. Finally, Kateryna will speak about the direct impact of military actions on the environment of Ukraine. We're going to start with the presentation by Alex Fisher, the ecological park at the chemical plant, and let me briefly introduce Alex. Alex Fisher is a writer and curator from Buffalo, New York. In May, he graduated with a master's in design studies with the domain Narratives, Trajectory, Power and Place from Harvard University. His research interests are in reformations of legacy and the mutual associations of natural built and political environments in formerly socialist contexts. He received his bachelor's from the University of Pennsylvania, where he majored in economics and history of art. In 2019-2020, He served as a Fulbright Student Research Fellow in Ukraine, during which he conducted fieldwork and organized artistic programs in cooperation with a wide range of public and private cultural platforms. Alex, the floor is yours.
Super, thank you so much. I think I'm going to be made the host so that I can share my screen. I'm just going to wait for that.
Yeah, that's happening.
Great.
So, do you want to turn your video on there? It's on already, sorry.
Yep.
Spotlight, and there you go.
Fantastic, okay. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just ask for a thumbs up from Eva that it's visible. Perfect, okay, great. I'm seeing that I'm also getting some notifications that I can admit people when they arrive, so I will click on those as I see them during my presentation. Thank you so much, Eva, for this really kind introduction and also the invitation to participate here today. I also just want to express my profound respect and admiration to everybody who's been so instrumental in starting this network. I am so excited to see how it develops over the course of the summer, and really hope that it can produce some exciting new forms of collaboration and cooperation. I also just want to thank my co-panelists for the opportunity to share the virtual stage with you. I'll just briefly mention that I had the real honor of working with Natasha Chychasova a few years ago, and so it's very cool for me to see her again. As Eva mentioned, the title of my presentation here today is The Ecological Park at the Chemical Plant. The general outline, I'm going to see, there we go. As you see here, is that upon the collapse of the Soviet Union, Ukraine inherited a massive arsenal of nuclear and conventional weapons, a huge amount of which has been subject to industrial demilitarization in the decades that followed. The prompts or the urgency to demilitarize varies based on different categories of weapons, which I will address shortly in this talk. But the real focus of my presentation here today, which departs from my recent case study of Ukraine's efforts to incinerate its stockpile of Soviet-produced PFM-1 pedal mines, is the operations of a state-owned enterprise in eastern Ukraine that has been responsible for demilitarizing intercontinental ballistic rocket missiles and PFM-1s. The two prompts that I'm going to be working with over the course of the next 13 or 14 minutes, the clock is already ticking, is one, what is the relationship between landmines and the mining industry? Thinking of these two categories and how they interact. And then the second prompt, which will form the basis of the latter half of the talk, is how does biomimicry influence human and more than human ties? So in that slide that I just showed, I mentioned that the Pavlohrad chemical plant, this large state-owned enterprise in eastern Ukraine, has been responsible for demilitarizing several categories of weapons that Ukraine inherited upon the collapse of the Soviet Union. The first category of weapons that it has been responsible for demilitarizing is intercontinental ballistic missile rocket motors. Here you see some elements of that process. As I'm sure most of you are aware, Ukraine in 1994 signed the Budapest Memorandum, a memorandum by which it agreed to sacrifice its inheritance of nuclear weapons in exchange for vague security commitments. The Pavlohrad chemical plant, over the course of the last 3 decades, has been involved in the destruction or recycling of those motors. The second category of weapons that the Pavlohrad chemical plant has been responsible for demilitarizing is PFM-1 pedal mines. These are mines that, as I just said, have a rather peculiar nickname of petal, after flower petal. It also has secondary nicknames of butterfly and green parrot. The sort of key facts to know about this weapon for the purposes of our presentation and discussion here today is that, yes, it was produced by the Soviet Union in massive numbers. Ukraine inherited 6 million of them. This mine is also made of plastic, which has made it very hard to disassemble. And so the Pavlohrad chemical plant developed a bespoke means to do so, which I will talk about in just a moment. The next thing is that Ukraine voluntarily agreed to sign and then ratify the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention, which is a global security framework aimed at eliminating the stockpiles of these mines. When Ukraine did sign that in the early 2000s, that began a large and strenuous process to destroy these small explosive devices, which Ukraine has really doggedly pursued, and up until the full-scale invasion had successfully incinerated 3 of 6 million of these PFM1 mines. Here you see the infrastructure whereby this process takes place. It's a large kiln. Basically, this is an oven on the premises of the Pavlohrad chemical plant, where these pedal mines, here you see them in clips, I hope you can see my mouse, where they are loaded onto a conveyor belt and then pushed into this kiln where the temperature is very hot. This causes the mines to detonate, and then the kiln sequesters the different parts, the liquid explosive, the plastic, and the small metal bits for recycling. For the purposes of today's presentation here as part of the Ukrainian Environmental Humanities Network, I really want to highlight what the conceptual implications of the recycling process at the Pavlohrad chemical plant are. The concept that the Pavlohrad chemical plant has been working with is one of swords to plowshares. Swords to plowshares is an entreaty that's originally coming from the Bible that encourages the transformation of tools of destruction or weapons of war into tools to benefit mankind, things that can serve a positive purpose for humanity rather than cause excessive suffering for it. It's striking in that there's a point of contact that happens in this process whereby the liquid explosive from incinerated PFM1s, remember this slide I showed, the liquid explosive that's contained within this small plastic mine is combined with recycled propellant from the ICBM rocket motors, and that forms its own bulk explosive, which is then sold for use in the mining industry. So the key takeaway from this is that, yes, this is an interaction between the disarmament of nuclear and conventional weapons, two categories that have pretty often been seen as being distinct from one another, but I would argue are feed into one another. And the second is that it creates a point of contact between different mining actions. One mining action being the elimination of Soviet-produced anti-personnel landmines, and the second being heavy resource extraction. I think this is important to emphasize, this recycling of landmines and intercontinental ballistic missile rocket motors into bulk explosives for use in the mining industry by looking at, the real symbolic importance and substantive importance of the mining industry in Ukrainian modernization. The mining industry, of course, is part of the rent-seeking economy. The proprietors of extractive enterprises in Donbass, Krivbas, etc., have acted as political rainmakers in Ukraine over the course of not just the last 30 years, but really over centuries. This also raises key questions about what are the proceeds of demilitarization. Ukraine, as I mentioned, voluntarily agreed to destroy its stockpile of PFM1 pedal mines, and the recycled remnants of them then went in for use in the mining industry. It also, and I think I'm very aware of the fact that we're speaking in an Anglophone setting here today, an English language discussion, that this also raises some conceptual questions around the act of claiming something as mine. There were, of course, many competing claims of possession upon the collapse of the Soviet Union, and that the status of the nuclear weapons was very uncertain, with Ukraine asserting that it was the legitimate inheritor and foreign parties querying that claim. There's also very limited contest, by contrast, on conventional weapons like the PFM1 pedal mines. Ukraine inherited those without any context, but has faced, a steep price in trying to dismantle them. And then finally, it's important to recognize the territorial discrepancies here. And here I'm talking about over the long term, thinking about where these recycled remnants are then being used. So that ends the first part of my discussion. And for the remaining 8 minutes or so, I will talk about the general territory of the Pavlohrad chemical plant, which has a rather specific quirk in that this is a large industrial enterprise that has a sprawling territory that is fenced in with big walls. And on the territory of this chemical plant in eastern Ukraine, there is a zoo or an ecological park. This happened starting in the early 2000s when the Pavlohrad chemical plant faced some accusations from residents of Pavlohrad, as well as Ukrainian environmental groups, that the process of demilitarization that I just described in the first half of my talk, this act of incinerating PFM1 petal mines, there was a lot of concern that this was going to cause toxic pollution that could have harmful effects on people's health and well-being. And so the Pavlohrad chemical plant came up with this idea that if they invited animals, they brought animals onto the territory, and if the animals were healthy, they thrived, then residents and environmental groups had very little to be concerned about. And so there's some really intriguing quotes associated with this that I'll mention as you see these pictures of Przewalski's horses and mouflons and red deer roaming around the territory of this chemical plant. One is a quote from Tatyana Holodenko, one of the employees of the Pavlohrad chemical plant, who said in a press conference that the presence of zoo animals on the territory of the plant was bioevidence of the positive work of the enterprise. So basically what they're trying to do here is to brand the enterprise as one that fosters multi-species healing. They even took in sick animals from Ukrainian zoos and nature reserves. And there's also this heavy symbolism associated with it, in that on an annual basis, the Pavlohrad chemical plant slaughters one of the animals and uses it to evaluate its organs and check if it's healthy or not. Here you see some more pictures about this relationship between sort of human and more than human ties. On the left, you see a screen grab from a promotional video when representatives of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, came to the Pavlohrad chemical plant to celebrate the successful destruction of 2 million petal mines. And ooh la la, there was a wild boar roaming the plant at that very moment that people were very excited to see. And on the right, you see the director of the Pavlohrad chemical plant presenting butterflies to distinguished guests at the aforementioned ceremony. This, of course, is also striking because, as I mentioned earlier in my talk, there is a nickname for the PFM1 mine that they recycle as a butterfly. I became really curious about this zoo on the territory of an industrial demilitarization facility. And that prompted me to reach out to 2 Ukrainian artists that I really respect and admire, and I hope that you all look into more. This is Yevhen Obrazov and Nastya Omelich, an artistic duo that comes from Dnipro, but also has family roots in Pavlohrad. And what they wound up creating, and it was actually just published earlier this month, is the zine you see here on the left. This zine pairs illustrations that Nastya did that show, that speak the position of the animals who live on the territory of the Pavlohrad chemical plant through the image of laboratory equipment. And they juxtapose that with direct quotations from the Pavlohrad chemical plant about the zoo zone itself. And what I'd just like to highlight about this is that, one, I think it shows this like peculiar and interesting, I'm just admitting a few more people from the waiting room, 1 second. There we go, is that it's showing this juxtaposition between the employment of biomimicry in the petal mine's design versus the presence of the animals on site. And for me, as someone whose background is primarily in art history and curation, I find this to be a really productive example of how artistic expression can be used to probe different modus operandi of disarmament and potentially in the future or now rearmament. Seeing as I have 1 minute left, I'm going to offer some closing remarks. What I hope I've put on the table in the last 14 minutes is querying some mutual association of natural, political, and threat environments. Of course, the mining industry has been heavily contorting Ukraine's political environment over a long durée. There's also this question of, the effect of these weapons on the natural environment, and especially their repurposing into bulk explosives for use in the mining industry. I also would like to just put on the table that there's some productive lessons that can be learned from reflecting on the tenets of demilitarization in Ukraine before Russia's full-scale invasion. This idea of learning from past practices and questioning whether they should be replicated, what can be changed in the future. And the final thing is that I find it really productive, and I'm so grateful to the organizers of this network for really centering this in their work, is emphasizing points of contact between different topics in the sense of between categories of weapons, human and more than human species, etc. And then the final prelude, the final conclusion would just to say that just as of a few weeks ago, the Russian army, as part of its unjustified and unprovoked war on Ukraine, launched airstrikes at the Pavlohrad chemical plant, which, due to the current situation, it's very hard to assess the damage, but it can be massive. And this is extremely troubling and warrants further review. So with that, I thank you profoundly for the opportunity to be here. I look forward to watching the presentations of my fellow panelists and to hopefully a spirited discussion afterwards.
Alex, thank you so much. Let me add that I read the whole paper that Alex prepared as his MA at Harvard. It's fantastic, and there are so many interesting threads. I hope we will be able to talk about some of them at the end of our seminar. Now let me introduce the second speaker, Natasha Chychasova. Natasha is a curator and researcher from Donetsk, based in Kiev. She works on post-Soviet legacy and on strategies for its deconstruction, as well as on feminist art practices. Natasha graduated with a master's program in art history from Taras Shevchenko National University of Kiev. Currently, she works as a head of the Contemporary Art Department at the National Art and Culture Museum Complex, Mestecki Arsenal in Kiev. Her curatorial projects include Finally We're Here, in Gorzów Wielkopolski in Poland in 2019, By Memory in Odessa, Ukraine. And this is not a museum, this is a plant in Dnipro, Ukraine. Non-Human Trilogy, Kiev, Ukraine. Letter to Mother Kiev, also Kiev, Ukraine. Silence Feminine, Ukraine Ablaze Platform, Hearth of Earth, Forms of Presence. Her articles were published at Your Art, Arts Looker, Shum Magazine, Blog Magazine, and Spika Media.
Thank you ever so much for your kind introduction, and many thank my colleagues for invitation to this beautiful discussion. It's a big pleasure for me to be here today. And one minute, I try to share a screen. I have no access to do it now. Oh, thank you so much. So let me know, can you see my slides?
We can see, but it's a bit small. Does anybody else see it small as well, or is it just me?
It is small.
Mm-hmm.
It's small.
Yeah.
So I try do it again. And now
Yeah, it is still small. Maybe you just share your presentation in its original form, because then it had a good size.
Okay.
Right.
And in this variant, you can see normal size.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So here we go. For me, it's important that I mostly will speak from the art perspective, because visual art is my main work field. And I want to tell a little bit more about the situation in which we live now in Ukraine. And maybe last 13 night, especially I spent in a row in a bomb shelter under the fire in Kiev, where I currently live. And it seems for me that the world has shrunk to gray dusty walls and endless lingering desire to sleep. And in this way, sleep becomes an invaluable gift, just as the world around just as the world around us, with fragrant black soil, forest, lakes, a landscape of half-forgotten home in Donbass, where I come from. And all these so well-known things become more tenable than ever, as a constant threat of losses reveals the fragility of everything around us. And Bruno Latour also addressed this idea, saying that air, water, land, all of those were present before in the background. Now they're explicit because we slowly come to realize that they might disappear, and we with them. And end of quote. Along with this, there are another thought that seems to lie on the surface, that everything connected with everything. For me, this was epitomized by the phrase of the mathematician Edward Lorenz, when the butterfly flutter its wings in one part of the world, it can eventually cause the hurricane in others. Therefore, the events and consequences of Russian war against Ukraine should be considered in the global context. It's now difficult to realize the full extent of destruction caused by Russia. But if we think about the most obvious, we will immediately remember the poisoned soil, groundwater, the threat of missile hitting the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and the destruction of local flora and fauna. In this indicates an approaching environmental crisis and poses a threat to the world when we live. According to researcher Kateryna Polianska, the damage caused by the war remains in the deeper layers of the earth, shells, mine, and debris, and all of this will only become visible when the war is over. End of quote. And the visual metaphor for me of all this process is this series of work by Ukrainian artist Kateryna Polianska, which called Medical and Political Fantasies about Luhansk, a city that has been occupied since 2014, where minds and human remains now coexist in agriculture spaces, and the war seeps into the soil. In terms of statistics, we know for possible estimates that about 170,000 square kilometers of Ukraine are currently mined, which is 30% of the total territory of Ukraine. 182,180 square kilometers of soil is contaminated with harmful substances, and 680 tons of petroleum products were burned during the shelling, which resulted in significant air pollution. 22,226 hectares of forest were burned by rocket, and it will take at least 10 years to restore some of the forest area. In the cycle of losses and destruction, life continues to repeat its cycles. And for me, this is widely epitomized by Ukrainian farmers who continue to harvest, care about the land, and to feed us all. In the interview to Washington Post, a 57-year-old farmer named Victor from Mykolaiv region told to the journalist this phrase: people need to get the grain, people must survive somehow. For me, these words are the epitome of caring, not only about ourselves, but also about those who even we don't know, who live in other continents. For us Ukrainians, the war revealed the importance of our contribution in the global food security and made the dusty metaphor of the breadbasket of Europe relevant again. It has become even more acute after the Russia block Black Sea ports, make it impossible to export Ukrainian grain and putting a number of countries at risk of starvation. It warns that 44 million people in 38 countries were facing emergency level of hunger. Here you can see on this slide, for example, you can see how many countries depend from Ukrainian grain, and the most fragile in this situation is the Horn of Africa, where drought was already pushing countries toward feminine condition. But it's not a surprise that Russia uses food as a weapon and way to manipulate decisions in its favor. For example, in his Telegram channel, Russian Premier Minister Dmitry Medvedev said, "The food security of many countries depend on our supplies. It turns out that our food is our silent weapon, silent but ominous." And it's horrible manipulation that that Russia used during a long-term period of history. And as Olesya Ostrovska-Luta mentioned in her text, organized food shortages lead to political starvation and are therefore a tool for controlling people. This is a story that is tragically known in Ukraine because of Holodomor. Holodomor was both an attempt, extermination, and a consequence of Stalin's internal colonization that leads to the future practice of environmental violence. End of quote. This number of things and events prompt us as an institution, the Mstetsky Arsenal, work on this topic precisely and create a project, Heart of Earth. In this project, we addressing various artistic practice and reflection. We thought to keep in focus the historical memory and the triangle of relationship with the earth, the people who cherish it, and the food it's born from the interaction between them. And when we work on this project, we ask ourselves maybe core question, our earth, what kind of land is that, and what is known about it from the point of view of food's importance for the world. In the global colonial transformation, how do exploit territories extremely influential but powerless and deprived of the voice of their own? In preparation for this exhibition, I, in cooperation with the Ukrainian artist Larion Lozovy, create our artistic research, which was dedicated to the way of Ukrainian grain, the consequences of the Ukrainian war, Ukrainian-Russian war, or the economy, and how the situation reflects on the world. We use the metaphor of cascade of consequences. And through that, we can see that the current situation is evolved, including the whole situation, the war in Ukraine, leads to regional instability, cleaning the forest for new crops, new waves of migration, cartline green program, and return to the fossil fuels. And to summarize all, it's important for me to know that now, as we continue our struggle, we always keep in mind the communities of people who have historically lived on the same land, raised their voice and tell their own story. We also do this by taking care of the land, of the minefield that need to be careful, cleared, the people who deserve to work on the land, safety, and not know the story of those who have been blown up by the landmine. About everyone who needs food and carries the memory of hunger. About the land that is no longer poisoned by bombs and for mindless production. About the exiles and their gardens somewhere in the south or in the east Ukrainian land. Gardens who neglect echoes with acute point every moment. For me, all this care and Ukrainian resilience are vividly embodied in the work of Anna Zvyagintseва Plantistic. And according to artists, the stick is able to grow even outside of human attention, but the only thing that the stick needs is soil, just like all of us. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Our final speaker today is Kateryna Polianska, who will talk about the impact of military actions on the environment of Ukraine. Kateryna is an environmental scientist in the international charitable organization Environment People Law in Kyiv. She gained her PhD in physical geography, geophysics, and geochemistry of landscape in Taras Shevchenko Kyiv National University in Ukraine. The title of her dissertation was Landscapes of Desna River Valley as Environment and Objects for Conservation of Nature. Kateryna is an expert on geoecological issues, landscape studies, conservation biology, writing analytical documents, research of the river valley's nature, protection of the wild animals, development of the Emerald Network, which is a network of international protected areas, and ecological education. Her work responsibilities include counseling citizens on issues of environmental protection, research of anthropogenic factors on the environment, scientific assistance to lawyers in handling EPL court cases, participation in the environmental impact assessment procedure and strategic environmental assessment, protection of valuable natural areas, study of the impact of hostilities on the environment, and calculation of losses due to war and methods of restoration of natural areas.
Dear participants, hello, good afternoon. Now I'm in Nova Basan, United Territorial Community during my work, and here is the head of this community, and there is other participants and other my colleagues. We are in the middle of our expedition when we are assessing the impacts of the war to the environment, and we collecting data for our research and for this assessment. And I wanted to show you just a second my screen. What we work with. Just a second. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, share. And from the beginning, Just a second. Yeah, here it is. I wanted to say that war have impact on the all parts of the nature, ground cover, flora, fauna, water, air, everything. And here on this slide, you can see the consequences on ground cover. It can be physical destruction and also chemical pollution. And here also in this territorial community, we have a lot of distractions, and we also work in Kiev region, Chernihiv region, Kherson region, Mykolaiv region, Kharkivska region, and Donetsk region, and collect this information. And also we collect some satellite images, and the first of them, it's Maksar. You can see a lot of craters after explosions. They're from different types of weapons, and here you can see the example of this crater, and also different types of explosive materials, and they can provide physical damage of the ground cover, because you can see this the crater, they destroy the structure of the ground, and also there is chemical pollutions because explosive materials inside of the weapons, they also, and out of the shells, they also have different toxic materials which can pollute our soils. And we collect some samples on the here on the screen. You can also see it's my office where I collect these soil samples, and we're preparing them to for the laboratories. We send them to the laboratories in Kiev, Lviv, and also in Bern to the Switzerland, and try to identify all toxic and all dangerous materials which can be danger for nature and for people. And there's thousands of these craters. Some territories of Ukraine look like moon landscape. We know it's a physical damage and the chemical damage, and we need maybe first a long period of time to clean these territories and to identify and to investigate which type of the pollution. There's like there's also example of the crater in the forest. There's a lot of them. They can be different diameters, and they have a different deep. It can be like 3 meters, almost 5 meters, 12 meters in diameter. It depends on the is it rocket or is it a shell or mine? And according to our defense forces office, we have a map of the pollution with these dangerous explosive materials. It's near 30% of Ukraine. And there's in Chernihiv region, there's and the territories which were liberated last year, there's still problem with the mining pollution because Russian troops they leave. There's a lot of these materials near the roads, in the forest, everywhere where they stopped and provide their activities. And also there's we have the special types of weapons, so when they can mine our territories from outside of Ukrainian borders or from the occupied territories. That's why there is still a lot of dangers, and it's looked like there is after our sappers worked on some territory in the Mykolaiv region, they found all this shells. It's mines, it's special mines which can they use it's aerial mines, and also it's just a small part of them, and there's a thousand of these things in our soils, in our forests, in our steppes, everywhere, and also around the villages and cities. Also, another type of soil destruction, it's destruction because of vehicles, their works, and also because of trenches, and there's also some impact on our nature and also agricultural lands. And the next type of the destruction, it's a combination of from abandoned military equipment, and you can see there's the burnt vehicles, and there's also they also can pollute our soils because of these materials, this fuel, and this burned parts of these vehicles. They're also very toxic for the nature, for the soils, for groundwater, and we need special like management things to clean these territories, to remove these soils, because they can't clean by themselves, and we need to remove them. And there's also problem with this, because we need a lot of resources, human resources, technical resources to provide these things. And also next example, the difficulties of this situation. It's an example with a shopping mall in Chernihiv city. It was on the first picture. It was before the war, and after the shelling, we have a huge pollution of the air pollution. And after we have from the satellite image, we can see this already destroyed place, and no, we can think that maybe it's all, but not. It's just a part of the problem, because when you investigate this place from the ground, you can see the pictures from this corner, and there's a lot of ash. There's tones of unburned or half-burned materials, which can be very toxic and poison for people, because during the windy weather, wind can like blow up these materials, and people on this satellite images, you can see there's already live in buildings and private sector where people continue to live, and they can breathe this air with ash, and also it can be very dangerous during the rainy weather.
Okay, I think let's just start our discussion now, and if Kateryna will join us later, maybe she will continue her presentation for a couple of minutes. Alex and Natasha, you're with us, right? Alex, I can see you.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, so I have prepared a number of questions, but to be honest, I would like to let the audience speak, because we have there are so many of us here, so I'm sure there are plenty of comments and questions for you. So if there's anyone here who would like to start, just please speak. Or you can also send a question in chat if that's preferable. Yeah, Aviva.
Kateryna's rejoined.
Oh, Kateryna joined us. Okay. Sorry. So shall we? Kateryna, can you hear us? Johnny, can you?
Kateryna's yeah, she's rejoined. I'm just waiting.
Okay, that's okay. Because I can see a lot of raised hands. So we'll wait with the questions for another couple of minutes then.
Sorry about that, Kateryna. We've removed the people who joined. And if you would like to finish your presentation, we can continue, or
Yeah, thank you so much. But I can join just from my phone. I will try just join from my computer. Just a second. Just a second. I'll try. Yeah, I can. Sorry, I can't join from my computer, but I can talk from the phone. Yeah, there's I can finish that. There's a lot of consequences, and there's a lot of impacts on our nature, and this they can be visible and they can be invisible. And there's also a lot of forest fires. We have a lot of impacts on biodiversity, pollution from the noise pollution, stress, destruction of habitats, nature habitats, destruction of flora, fauna, and sometimes we just can't see these consequences because we have no access to the forests because it's still dangerous to go to the forest. It's still dangerous to go to some parts of the national parks. But we try to do it. We work with 3 national parks, with Kamienska Sich in Kherson region, with Svety Gor in Donetsk region, and with Desnyansko-Starogutski National Park in Sumy region, and we work with their staff and try to investigate their territories. There is some when we have an access, we collect some samples from the craters. So we investigate the consequences from the forest fires. We have special protocols and like this, and we have our database, and every time we collect this evidences, because our organization, we just not only scientists, we're also lawyers, and we wanted to prepare this evidence for International Crime Code. We cooperate with the Prosecutor Office of Ukraine, and we learned how to prepare these evidences and how to use international methodology, how to count these consequences. That's why this is very important. And this meeting, they have a name of Ecocide, but according to the law and according to the rules of law, still we can't say there's that it is in Ecocide until the decision of the court. In Ukrainian courts, we already have 15 cases. It's a crime cases with the name of Ecocide, and we're just waiting for the decision of the court, and then we can officially say that this is an ecocide. Also, in our crime code, we have this term ecocide. According to the international law, there's also a lot of discussions because it's a very difficult term. And before, in the first time they use this term just for the situation in Vietnam, and also there's a difficult definition of this term, because this term they need a huge long-term impact on the nature complexes. That's why we try to understand all these consequences from war on our nature. We also try to understand changes in the population of wild animals, changes in our nature ecosystems, how they will change during the war, because it can be sometimes it can be also some positive things, because sometimes our armed forces, they destroy some dams, and it can be some positive effects on the rivers, but it's there's a lot of discussions on this topic, and we still need to analyze all these things. We continue our work. We cooperate with other ecological organizations, because it's very hard just for one organization to do this work. That's why it's a network of organizations. So also some organization works on methodological some things, and some organization collect information about the huge industrial facilities which were destroyed during the war. And we decided that we will work with the wild nature direction, and we will collect information about these distractions. Thank you so much for your attention. We continue our work. We have a lot of field trips. We published all our information on our website and in our social media. And if you will, if you're interested in organizers of this meeting, have my contacts. If you can ask them, and or you can find our organization in the internet, and yeah. Ask about some more information about the war and consequences. Thank you so much for your attention. I'm waiting for your questions. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kateryna. We still have a bit more than 20 minutes. So our first question would be from Aviva Rahmani, if you're with us.
Thank you. I just want to say, I think what you're doing is the most important thing going on in the world right now. I'm very grateful that you've made these presentations. I have two questions. One is it premature for you to be designing a strategy to deal with the scale of contamination? And secondly, how can individuals such as myself, I'm an artist, how can we support your work?
Thank you so much. Yes, there's about this combination, about this pollution. It's hard. It's now very hard because sometimes Ukrainian laboratories, they have no like possibilities to provide all this like to analyze all these samples, and it's hard for them. That's why we have just a part of the list of the toxic materials. It's a heavy metals. It's also it can be also a very high level of other materials. There's rocket fuel, which like dieseline. It's a very toxic thing, and it's hard. It's like when we have the craters with this with the rocket fuel, it's like a local ecological disaster because it's one of the highest level of the pollutant materials. And there's a strategy how to clean. There's no strategy how to clean all these craters, and our armed forces say first stage is to clean this territory from the explosive materials, prevent the deaths of the people, and then local authorities they try to solve the problem with pollution, chemical pollution. That's why we're still looking for the answers, and we try to solve this problem with our ministry. The second
I think Natasha could certainly answer the second question about work with artists, as she's just curated this massive show in Kiev on this very topic.
Maybe we wait that Kateryna back to us and finish. But I'm not sure, maybe she have a problem with the connection. But okay, I will try to answer on the second question. For me, now it's important to continue to tell the story of Ukrainians, and tell the story about Russian-Ukrainian war. So if you want to tell it together with us, it's very important. And for me, it's important as well to do some kind of project with the locals, with someone from Ukraine who can give you more information specifically about the topic which you're interested in, and give the point of view somehow. And as well, we have the institution, the art institution as a Mistetsky Arsenal, or like other, any other, like an Izolatsia, for example, which can not a host, but can provide you some important contact which you need and help you in your project and in your research.
Thank you both.
I think Kateryna is back with us. Can you hear us?
Yeah, sorry, there's a problem with internet connection. I can hear you.
Yeah, if you'd like to add something to Aviva's second question about what can we do? How can we?
You can just if somebody wanted to help, you just can find my contacts and organizers and send me some message, because we have a huge network of volunteers. We work with them. There's like informational field of work. There's also we're trying to find some connection with people from countries which know some more about this war conflicts, and we're studying these materials, and just so you have like, we have work for next 100 years. That's why if you want, you just try to reach us, and we will talk with you, and we'll find some ways. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Sasha has raised hand. Sasha D, can you hear us?
I can hear you well. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for fantastic presentations. It was so useful, and your work is absolutely brilliant, all of you. My question is for Alex. I had a chance to visit Eastern Ukraine recently, and I was just shocked by the abundance of these anti-personnel landmines called Petrol. And I was also shocked by the abundance of Russian disinformation about it, which circulates really widely. So it's a really widespread belief that these anti-personnel landmines are dispersed by Ukrainians, not by Russians, that Ukraine is responsible for polluting its own territory with these highly explosive devices that harm civilians. How do you counter this disinformation? Yeah, basically, this is my question. How do you bring in sanity into this discussion? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much for that question. I mean, I didn't go into that in my presentation. I tried to sort of stick within the territory of Pavlograd chemical plant because it felt a bit contained. But you're absolutely right, is that there's huge information asymmetries here. And one of the key reasons is because, I mean, Ukraine has voluntarily joined this anti-personnel mine ban convention and has consistently been extremely transparent about what it has and what it doesn't have. Whereas Russia has never joined this treaty. And so it's this sort of black box. And of course, they exploit that information asymmetry to the greatest extent possible. I would say, I mean, this is something, the other case I would point to in the same sphere is that there have recently been a number of reports of these PFM1 petal mines being picked up by birds. Crows, for example, supposedly pick them up in their beaks and fly around with them and drop them in random places, which of course, it's kind of hard to verify these stories, but the conceptual implications are huge, right? If they are picking up something that resembles a flower and thinking that it's something, you know, to bring to their nest or something, it raises key questions for researchers like me who are trying to study that. But you are 100% right in trying to draw some conclusions that I'm not on the ground there. I don't have that experience. And so I try to stick to contained cases for that very reason. But I really respect your question, and it has, of course, huge implications. And my sort of 2 points would be that Russia exploits information asymmetries because it has not joined what Ukraine has joined. and that it raises lots of new questions.
Thank you, Alex. Do we have more questions from our audience? If not, for now, then let me ask. I have a question for Kateryna. I actually have three questions. The first one is about the notion of ecocide, because as you mentioned, not much can be done with it until it's like stated by court that something is actually ecocide. So my question would be, is it possible to, like, apart from just collecting traces and of the ecocide, is it possible from the legal point of view to take some steps right now, or do we have to wait until the ecocide is like officially stated by the courts? That's my first question. Another one is about investigations of eco-crimes in the areas that are currently in the military zones. Is it possible to approach these places somehow, or like do you have to wait? And my final question is about prediction. Like, do you think that after the war will finish at some point, will there be areas that will be unfit for inhabitation for both humans and non-humans? Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's the question about ecocide. It's a difficult question, and our lawyers work with this, and maybe it will be they can answer for it better. But from our last discussion, there's they told me that we need. Like we can work, we can collect all this information about all these evidences, and also we need to learn the examples and previous experience from other countries, and that's it will be very helpful. And there's also in European in the International Crime Court and European communities, they also try to solve this question. I think that it will be better to speak with our lawyers. I can't now to answer very clear to this question about the military zones, and there's different zones near the front line, and it can be zones where which you can reach, and where you can provide your investigation, but they're still dangerous, and you can work on the liberated territories, and but it's for some people it's still possible, but it's still dangerous, and some organizations, some international organizations, not a lot of them can do this, and but the authorities of the national parks, they try to collect some information, and but it's sometimes it's very difficult, because we during the time every time our nature consensus, it changes, and it's hard to collect information after winter season, after spring season, after summer season, because you will see a different picture after 1 year, after 2 years, and also people try to clean all these scenes. They try to clean their territories after the battlefields, and sometimes you can find some evidences, because people already cleaned them. That's why you need to work there first, and it's very important. And maybe after war, it will be some territories which need this cleaning for a long period, maybe for 10, for 20 or 50 years, because it's still too very hard to clean, like 40,000 of hectares of the forest, or 30% of Ukraine, or some territories which have a very huge pollution with these explosive materials, and maybe it will be maybe for people can come back to these territories, but nature try to come back. Some plants and some forests. There's a good example with this red zone in France. That's why maybe time will show. We need a monitoring, we need special monitoring of the zones, and we need a very serious scientific research to understand the situation, to see what will happen with our nature. Is it possible to restore these territories?
Thank you, Kateryna, for your answer. We have a question from Bogdan Sinenko.
Yeah, hi. I have a question to Kateryna too. Firstly, I want to say that you do a great job and your presentation was just excellent. I have a question. What about the contamination with the radionuclide on the Polisia? Do you investigate this, or it's out of your interest, science interest in scope?
Thank you, Bogdan. There's our organization. We don't investigate this pollution with radionuclides, but we like there's Ukraine have a monitoring system, special monitoring system, and this system told us that there's like now there's not we haven't a high level pollution with this radioactive materials. There's still the same situation as it was before the war.
Kateryna, we cannot hear you very well, unfortunately, so we'll probably have to repeat when we get the connection fine. It's okay. When Kateryna will join us, we will hear back from her again. We still have 5 minutes. So in the meantime, there's a question from Johnny.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I really enjoyed all of the talks, and kind of following from Bogdan's question. Bogdan is going to speak at the Chernobyl seminar in a month or so. I had a question for Alex, because a lot of what you're describing in terms of how, you know, the image of nature is being deployed by people at the plant to signal, you know, recovery in human health is very similar to what's going on in other abandoned places like this with Chernobyl, but also in the US, where nature comes to stand in for to try and remove people's fear about contaminated landscapes. I just would like to hear a little bit more about that, and whether you think that there's different groups of people, possibly what are the motivations behind that. I'd just like to hear a little bit more about why you think they're doing that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. You know, for me, this is where the, you know, like no project about Ukraine without Ukrainians is really important, and that I was wrestling with this a lot. And then I started working with Nastya Omalich and Yevhen Obrazov, these two artists from Eastern Ukraine who have personal family ties to Pavlohrad. And it was Nastya coming up with these illustrations whereby the body parts of the animals who live on Pavlohrad's territory that resemble instruments, this sort of helped make it click in my head. It's this instrumentalization like actual instrumentalization of more than human species in this demilitarization process that I find so intriguing with this case, whereby the buffalo or bison that are roaming across the brim of a ICBM missile silo are the signals that the demilitarization process is happening in an effective manner. And there's a real sort of quite close tie that's established there. And so for me, this is kind of the importance of also to kind of put a bow on why we're here today, is that sort of interdisciplinary collaboration that produces some sort of insight or some alternative perspective on the reality. So that would be my comment, is that for me, approaching that through collaboration and thinking about this instrumentalization component feels the most productive response. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. We've got 3 last minutes, so maybe we'll finish with this question. I have questions for, this question is for all our speakers today. So Natasha, you were talking about how a butterfly swings steering up the world on the, like you were talking about grains, about food. But I was also wondering about other negative impacts, like on the international level, when we're talking about environments. Do you have any other examples how the full-scale invasion impacts not only Ukraine, but also other environments?
Thank you for your question. For me, it's hard to say because I'm not a scientist, and we have a talk to some ecologists to our other discussion about this question, and he said that, for example, if we have this missile attack on Ukraine, and some big plant is just blew up, the number of pollution is come to the air, and we breathe the same air, and this polluted area are shared. And for example, when we have this horrible situation with Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is even bigger than Chernobyl one, it was the huge, if Russia missiles bombed this nuclear power plant, it will be a huge disaster for all our neighbor countries. So in this perspective, it's important to say that all things which happened in Ukraine is influenced, and even when we speak about this groundwater, for example, when the missiles put on the ground, they toxify the ground and the water, and it's flowed to the bigger river as a Dnieper, for example, or other, and they toxified the water at whole. So it could be the big problem for all of us, which we need solved together.
Thank you. Alex, would you like to add something? I think Kateryna didn't join us.
Yeah, I'll add a very brief comment in that I didn't touch on it in this presentation today, but the demilitarization process at Pavlograd chemical plant, this is a process that has also been about coalition building between Ukraine and its Western partners, and that project has been co-funded by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, and has also enjoyed significant support from the Norwegian government and various other Western governments. And so, you know, when that site is struck by Russian missiles, that's also Russian missiles attacking a place where Ukraine was maturing its bonds with its Western partners. And so I think, you know, tracking the constituent parts of a project like that, you really get to see what is being trying to shatter as a result. So that's my brief comment. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. I think that's a good comment to end our first seminar with this thought that we are in this whole big ecosystem, and the war in Ukraine impacts not only Ukraine. That's why it's important to think how we can all what we can do to help, and how can we get engaged. I am very happy to see so many people during this first seminar, and thank you so much to all our speakers. And please follow us on Twitter and Instagram, because we will be having more seminars in the next weeks and months. And also, please reach out to us with any idea you have. Tell us about your research, tell us about your interest, because we really want to be this very inclusive place, and we want to work with all of you and share what you do, and see what can we do to support Ukraine, but also to develop knowledge about Ukraine, about environment. I think it's very important right now. Johnny, would you like to add something?
No, I think that's all. That was it was brilliant. Thanks for everyone for joining, and just make sure you come along to the next ones as well.
Thank you so much. Hope to see you soon.